Hazbin Hotel, the passion project of Vivian Madrano, sustained by the dollars of Patreon supporters and a crapload of merch. Honestly, seeing how VivziePop has managed to pioneer indie animation projects and finding help from not only Patreon supporters, but also other production companies to help with voice talent has been exceedingly impressive. The pilot for Hazbin Hotel released back in 2019, and in between that pilot and the current Amazon Prime/A24 series, we had Hell of a Boss sustaining our attention. And for good reason. The importance of maintaining interest in the series was vital to keeping the hype of Hazbin Hotel for when it would eventually be released on streaming services. Going several years in the dark without anything to hold us over would have been seriously detrimental to the final release of Hazbin Hotel. Hell of a Boss was necessary, expanding the world and creating a whole fandom slowly growing over the years. I hear a lot of people get really upset with the excessive profanity in Hell of a Boss, and they somehow think that's a legitimate criticism as to why it doesn't deserve its popularity when we have so many other shows that use excessive profanity and are radically popular, South Park and Rick and Morty being the primary examples. I've been watching Hell of a Boss on my own time as episodes released, and I couldn't care less about the profanity. I mean, they're in hell. It would be weird if they weren't cursing, but also I'm in my 20s and live with other 20-somethings, so excessive profanity is pretty normal for me, though it's not nearly as much profanity as what I was exposed to in middle school. Man, those kids were vile. The long-awaited day has arrived and we can finally see what Hazbin Hotel has in store for us. I think the most interesting part of the show is how they reframe Lucifer, similar to Paradise Lost, how they make Lucifer more of a victim rather than just a jerkwad like he's usually portrayed. A lot of people are kind of reanalyzing and updating their idea of Lucifer and utilizing that new perspective to make him a sympathetic character. Heaven keeps sending an extermination team down to hell to kill off sinners in order to make sure they can't rise against heaven. So Charlie wants to reform sinners so they can get into heaven and avoid being killed by heaven's genocide squad.
Well, maybe it doesn't have to be. Just because nobody has made it out before doesn't mean it's not possible.
I hope you like musicals, because that's what this show is. I mean, if all the gays go to hell, then it's gotta be filled with musicals. What did you expect? I think what's hilarious is we usually see the dichotomy twist between angels and demons, where demons are nice and proper and angels are jerkwads and debaucherous, kind of like panty and stocking with garter belt. But everyone here is kind of just a jerkwad unless they aren't. It's like either people are just who they are and their placement in heaven or hell actually means nothing, or it's commenting on heaven not actually being all that cool if you interpret the stories in the Bible with a modern eye. Hard for me to decide, but either way, I like it. It feels honest either way.
But these are souls. They are not the same.
The most interesting aspect isn't quite how heaven is just the power in control and they don't actually care about rehabilitation. They only care about keeping control. The interesting part is Charlie having to compete with other bigger companies in hell trying to capitalize on the hysteria and panic that the sinners in hell are undergoing now that they know the genocide is going to happen more and more often. It's very much using human tactics in what is supposed to be a divine setting because humans will resort to human methods. It's making TV and radio into demons to show that, not so subtly, that we let media control us to such an extreme degree that it corrupts us little by little. It's honestly pretty clever, making media into literal demons, and of course radio versus TV having beef with each other is just hilarious tongue-in-cheek. The show switches in between Charlie trying and somewhat floundering to rehabilitate Angel Dust and Serpentius, which provides the majority of the comedy, and following Alistair conferring with the other higher demons as they try to deduce who killed an angel and argue about what to do next, usually with conflicting opinions and butting heads. If I'm going to be frank, the songs are good, but they're kind of placed at odd times, like they just start in the middle of a scene. It's kind of, it interrupts the story while also progressing it. It's not bad. It's just awkward sometimes. When it comes to making a good story, you need every character to have their own personal motivation. Up until now, we had Charlie and Vaggie having their own understandable motivation. Angel Dust didn't make sense and largely isn't directly part of the bigger genocidal problem, his motivation being that he's in a contract with Valentino and needs to get out of it and wants to protect Charlie from it. It's more like a B-plot to the story. It's compelling, and don't get me wrong, it adds a unique dynamic between Angel Dust and Charlie. Now they're at odds, but only because they want to protect each other. I like how they write Angel Dust specifically because they make sure to write his dialogue obviously fake. That kind, the kind of dialogue of someone trying too hard to be sexy, the kind of sexy that people write when they don't know how to sound sexy, like what you hear from a bad porno. But that's the whole point of his arc. He's putting up a front the entire time, and Husk is the only one who really sees sees through it only because he's been in similar shoes to Angel Dust, and it requires someone who's fallen as hard as he has in order to properly empathize and get Angel Dust to really open up about his problems. Two people that are really polar opposites that allow Angel Dust to be set on the right track.
You don't know me. Sex ain't the only thing I'm good at.
And now, even though it wasn't really Charlie's doing, Angel Dust is now kinda almost the first successful resident of the hotel. Hi there. I'm sick. I've been sick for a week, so this is what you get. I think it's interesting how the longer time goes and the more media that releases that centers around Christianity or heaven and hell being the epicenter of, like, the plot, we're slowly treating Christianity and the multiple subdivisions and offshoots of that less of a religion and more of a mythology as we adapt it into TV shows and movies, which I think is really cool. As someone who hasn't had the most fun experience with the church, being one of them queers, I like this approach because I think the setting and, the broad strokes of the stories in the Bible and, Apocrypha are kind of cool. We're getting Percy Jackson in the Ars Goetia. I especially became initially interested, as many others of you, with Supernatural. Plenty of you impressed your Christian school teachers with how many angels you were able to list off solely because you were a massive fan of Supernatural. I eventually read the very first self-insert Christian fan fiction, Dante's Inferno, which, man, that was a disappointment. Then I went on to read, the Lesser Keys of Solomon and the Ars Goetia, and then I found this weird wiki where they combine, every religion, including Christianity, and, the pagan religions and Lovecraft into one big, story, which at first I thought it was super strange, and then I started reading it, and I'm like, it's actually kind of cool. Weird, but cool. Now I feel like I can explore these interests without the crushing weight and expectations placed upon me by the radical church movements. Hell of a Boss and Hazbin Hotel understand the importance of taking the parts of these stories that are interesting and just having fun with them. That's what I really appreciate about these sorts of shows. And if you're a sinner, how about you take a second to subscribe? You're welcome here. Funny enough, this show has a seriously different vibe from Hell of a Boss, which would make sense given that one revolves around killing people and one focuses on rehabilitating people. I'm just waiting to see if this is going to make any allusions to the prison industrial complex, given that it so heavily focuses on rehabilitating people versus locking them up. Only this time the prison is hell. So Charlie figures out that Adam, the angel that was a massive jerkwad, isn't the one in charge, so she's trying to work up the ladder in order to appeal her idea. I think Lucifer is the most real character out of everyone, someone who wants to defend his daughter but just can't get behind her cause given his past, knowing that heaven is filled with people who don't concede or negotiate with others, and how his past is making a serious strain with his daughter regardless of knowing her intentions are good. But to Lucifer, his intentions were good as well, and so she's very much the apple that didn't fall far from the tree. Of course, Charlie would want to rehabilitate sinners. It was incredibly similar to what Lucifer wanted and fought for. It makes their relationship so heartwarming. This show is really giving Lucifer some good PR, so Lucifer agrees to help Charlie get in talks with the higher-ups. We see the angels don't know what really qualifies someone to get into heaven, which I argue is how we, as people, have conflicting morals on what is good and bad, and how, in the end, no one can really say what qualifies someone for heaven, and it's really just a matter of maintaining the status quo, even when evidence is shown that people can change even in death. Alistair has clearly been playing the very long game where he's been friendly with Charlie just to get her to work for him, and now she's made a deal where she's indebted a favor to Alistair in exchange for info on how to kill the angels. The story is very much moving toward power is not freely given to the oppressed and therefore must be taken by force. Regardless of good intention, power is what will not be let go willingly, regardless of whatever stance those in power say they believe in, which in this case is clearly heaven saying they believe in goodness, but when it comes to actually practicing it, the hypocrisy is shown. Kind of like how we see, radical churches and their hypocrisy as they use the word of the Bible in order to advance their own political motive. This show isn't a reflection of heaven and hell, and it's actually a reflection of our world and the imbalanced power structure that we are currently fighting. They have no choice but to fight the incoming extermination, and during this fight we see them slowly manage to hold their own, and and even though plenty of angels are killed, the main characters always choose to spare the angels when they manage to get them down. Usually this would be lame and cheesy, but this really is them maintaining their moral position, their belief in change and mercy for souls. And even during their most dire hour, they still hold that belief because they truly want change. Hazbin Hotel is a great show as we expected, but the layers that you can interpret from the story is even better than I had expected. Alistair's story sadly was never fully explored since they clearly plan on setting up season 2, especially since Sir Pentious dies and is sent to heaven, showing us that there are ways to rehabilitate a soul that's outside an angel's control. But that's just my takeaway from it. Tell me what you think of Hazbin Hotel and what it means to you. Don't forget to subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay beautiful and keep playing.